With you all night.
On air, online, 24 hours, streaming on FOX61's.
Tracking primary night vote totals down to your hometown. I'm Keith McGilvery. I'll be at the big board with the results all night long.
We're taking you right to the candidates on your ballot.
And lifting the veil on the election process.
Plus, election security and the issues on voters' minds. CT Primary, your vote starts now.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us here. I'm Ben Goldman.
And I'm Sara Sanchez. Tonight is a special primary election coverage right here on FOX61's. Thanks for joining us.
Our crews are out at the polls with the candidates, finding the election stories that matter the most to you. We'll be checking in with them across Connecticut in just a moment. But first, download the free FOX61 News app so you can have all of our election coverage right at your fingertips. From our FOX61 voter guide to hearing directly from candidates on the issues that matter most to you.
And for full results as they come in, text VOTE to 860-527-6161, and we'll send the results straight to your phone. And tonight we're joined by Professor Wesley Renfro from Quinnipiac University. He's providing us analysis and helping us break down primary night.
While also helping us look ahead to November on election night, Professor Renfro not only teaches politics, but he's worked in Connecticut's General Assembly. Big thanks for joining us here.
Thanks.
So one of the major races we're looking at, Wesley, is the contentious Senate race, obviously, tonight. Three Republicans all vying for a chance to run against Senator Blumenthal in the general election. And you're saying that we could see a bit of a surprise here.
Well, you know, we don't have a lot of polling on this. We're going by endorsement. In general, we think that name recognition matters a great deal here. I have a gut feeling, but no more than a gut feeling, that Themis Claridis will probably pull it out. I don't know that for sure, and I think we'll know more shortly.
And we mentioned those three Republicans all vying for the chance to run against Senator Blumenthal in the general election. Is this a race that Blumenthal is used to?
No, I think that if Themis Claridis wins, that it will be a more competitive race than what he is used to. I think that her tilt towards the middle will perhaps be scary to him. I don't quite know that he will be able to paint her as an extremist in the way that he would others. And so I think there will be an interesting dynamic, although he certainly has a lot of incumbency advantage.
We do want to start our team coverage here. We begin tonight with FOX61's Emma Wolfhorst, our political reporter, live in New Canaan with Leora Levy's team. She's been endorsed by President Trump. Emma.
Good evening, Ben, Sara. Polls closed just a few minutes ago in Connecticut, and we're live here now in Greenwich at the Leora Levy primary night party. Supporters starting to trickle in here now behind me. They're setting up for what they hope is a victorious bash. As you mentioned, that Trump endorsement coming last week. And guests, Leora will be here in just a few minutes, hoping to speak to these guests. The RNC committeewoman and Cuban native served as ambassador to Chile, nominated in 2019 by then President Donald Trump. Levy prides herself on lack of elected experience, arguing she's the only true conservative candidate in this U.S. Senate race. As we said, she received that endorsement from Trump last week and believes that was enough to push her to the front of this U.S. Senate primary race. Now, we will keep you updated on air and online. As we said, polls just closed a few minutes ago. As results start to trickle in, we will bring you those latest updates. For now, live in New Canaan, Emma Wolfhorst, FOX61 News.
Thank you. Continuing our live team coverage tonight, Matt Cairns in Middletown with heavily favored party-endorsed candidate Themis Claridis. Matt, what's the feeling at the headquarters tonight?
Well, hi, guys. The polls just closed at 8 o'clock, so any minute now you could start seeing those vote tallies start to come in here in the hotly contested Republican primary for U.S. Senate. We are live here in Middletown at the headquarters for Themis Claridis. People are starting to filter in. The stage quite literally set here behind me, where Claridis hopes to deliver a victory speech tonight. Earlier, though, today, she was out at the polls trying to drum up some last-minute support with voters. Republican U.S. Senate candidate Themis Claridis greeted voters outside the polls in Trumbull.
I feel very positive about the results of the work we've put in the past 6 months.
But she's feeling the heat from Trump-endorsed candidate Leora Levy.
Certainly some people will pay attention to that, but the reality is this is the Connecticut race.
A Connecticut race where unaffiliated and independents can't vote in the primary, a big voting bloc for Claridis. Is she conservative enough to win?
I have fought for Republican principles for over 2 decades. I am proud of supporting lower taxes, less regulation, securing our borders, supporting our law enforcement.
Some Republican voters felt very passionate about the issues.
I really feel that our freedoms, our constitutional rights are at stake.
While others made their decision at the last minute.
I did some research during lunch, during my lunch hour, and I forget the person's name.
And we asked Democrats, is there any chance they'd switch to vote for a Republican?
Very doubtful.
There would be zero chance of that.
All right, and so the Claridis campaign told me that going in through the night here, they feel very confident about their chances. They do have a victory speech prepared, so we'll just have to watch those numbers come in and see how tonight turns out. Want to turn things over now to my colleague, Tony Black, who is live at the Peter Lumaj campaign. Hi, Tony.
Yeah, Matt, the polls have now closed, and it's really a waiting game for the candidates who are trying to unseat Senator Richard Blumenthal. One of those candidates joining us, Peter Lumaj. Peter, first, talk to us about who's with you today.
A number of supporters. I got my family here, my wife, my son Frank, and a lot of supporters and volunteers, and I appreciate them being here.
So the polls have closed now. How are you feeling?
We're feeling pretty good, actually. Now we did what we could. We made a number of phone calls. We contacted lots of people, text messaged a lot of people. So let's see what's going to happen now. But we feel pretty good.
What did you hear from voters today?
The main concerns that they have is security, lawlessness, chaos in our state. The economy is very important to them. A few nights ago, actually, I went up to Enfield and I met with the Italian-American community over there. The greatest concern that they had was the economy and security for them. So these are things, these are kitchen table issues that we're discussing every single night when we talk to the voters.
What was your pitch from the start to voters here in Connecticut that you're the one to take on Senator Richard Blumenthal?
Look, I'm the only candidate in the race that I maintained my positions as a consistent conservative, never changed my positions. I've been involved in politics for the past 10 years, always been pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro the Constitution, never changed my positions. I didn't take advantage of the voters, if you will, or the people that I spoke with, and adjusted my positions in accordance to what they wanted to hear. I just maintained these positions. Win or lose, I'm the only conservative in this race, and I've been received very well so far.
You come from a very unique background, coming from a communist country. How do you think that would represent Connecticut voters in D.C.?
Look, I'm the only one who understands the danger that is coming to the United States. When Reagan said to look at the greatness of the United States, you should use the eyes of refugees, and I'm one of them. We see the greatness of this nation. I live the American dream every single day with my family, but on the other hand, I see the danger that is coming to the United States through socialism, which is an evil ideology. It must be defeated. We have elected officials, including Blumenthal, who got sworn in to protect and defend the Constitution, and yet they go to the United States Senate and Congress, and all of a sudden they are promoting socialism. We must defeat that ideology because I've seen what it does to people and what it does to nations. My father was tortured to death by socialists, and he sacrificed his life so my brothers and I could live in freedom, and we're living in freedom. But that freedom is slipping away, and that's why I'm involved in this, because I'm concerned about the future of my children, your children, and generations to come.
Peter, last question for you. What would you say to the thousands of voters here in Connecticut who got out to the polls today?
Look, I thank them very much because it's not easy to get a vote today and be out there in this kind of heat that we faced. I appreciate what they are doing, and I think that the energy that we're seeing, they are taking it seriously. They want to defeat the failed liberal policies that they are facing because it's affecting all of them, regardless of their political affiliations. They are hurting, and we must change course in our state.
Thank you, Peter. Best of luck to you guys. We will send it back to you guys in the studio for now, live in Norwich. Tony Black, Fox 61 News.
All right. Thank you, Tony. Now, these three candidates are facing off against each other tonight, but all for the chance to run against Senator Richard Blumenthal in November. Despite facing the lowest approval ratings of his career, Blumenthal has yet to lose a race in his 37-year career.
Senator Blumenthal has a habit of claiming his seats and staying so far. He was originally elected as Connecticut's Attorney General for an unprecedented 5 terms, 20 years in office. Now he's running for his 3rd term into the Senate, another 6 years. But this is the first time that Blumenthal will face a well-known state politician, Themis Claridis, who served as a representative in the state house for more than 20 years. So not only is this one of the most contested primaries, but it also has some of the biggest consequences, it seems. Senator Blumenthal being a staple in Connecticut politics since 1977, he'll need a strong opponent. Wes, talk to us a little bit here if the Senate race is setting up the Republican Party for success or not.
I mean, I think that again, Richard Blumenthal has a lot of advantages, and it's somewhat difficult, even in a good Republican year, to imagine a Republican upset. Nonetheless, I think that if the Republican Party has to pick somebody who's going to win, Themis Klarides is probably very close to the ideal. She is well known. She has a compelling personal story. She is a good and direct speaker. Her stances are not hard right and appeal to many centrist votes. So I think there is a strong GOP logic behind this candidate.
Talk about this election in itself, though, because we have these three candidates all represent a different part of the way the GOP is going. What does this tell us, do you think? Does it give us any clues into what we can see maybe in November?
Hopefully we'll know more in an hour,
Okay,
or when we see a little bit
I know
more.
it's a lot of predicting, right? Yeah.
Of the actual votes. But, you know, there have been other bellwethers, right? And it's clear that in some cases the Trump endorsement matters, and in other cases it does not. I think that in and of itself is interesting because perhaps 2 years ago or 18 months ago, I think many people would have said that a Trump endorsement was a surefire way to win a primary, and the fact that it's a little bit more mixed now may be more of a sign that things are weakening for Trump a little.
And we touched on this at the end of our 6 p.m. hour, but we were rushing out of time then. We want to talk about the primary process here in Connecticut. I want to address all independents and people who might not be taking part in this process, and the fact that the primary process, a lot of people would say, isolates a lot of voters and brings extreme candidates on both sides to the forefront.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people in this state and in other states who are not able to vote because it is a closed primary system. If it were open, they would be able to vote. There are trade-offs and all of these things. There are also other structural issues with the way that we do primaries. But the thing that I think that folks sometimes don't understand, whether they like it or not, is that political parties at best are semi-public institutions. They are mostly private clubs where the members decide their own rules. And it would be very difficult to convince the members in the state of Connecticut, for example, to open up their primaries, because then all of a sudden they might have less control over who the candidate becomes. And so there's a powerful set of institutional forces that keep the primary here closed.
Interesting. All right. Well, we do want to talk about the other side of the aisle here. The Democratic Party gathering in New Haven tonight as results just start to come on in.
FOX61's Gabby Molina joins us live from there with more on which races they are watching. Hi, Gabby.
Hey, Ben and Sarah. Yeah, the Democratic Party is watching things from here at Trinity Bar and Restaurant in New Haven. And here, all eyes are on the races for Secretary of the State and Treasurer. The endorsed candidates for both of those positions will be here tonight. Now, on Secretary of the State side, that's State Representative Stephanie Thomas. And on the Treasurer side, that's Attorney Eric Russell. Now, I did get a chance to catch up with the Democratic chairwoman about what they're expecting from today's primary.
Turnout is very low, actually, on both sides. And I think, at least on our side, it's because the races are Secretary of the State and Treasurer, and they don't generate the excitement that a U.S. Senate or a governor would generate. And it was so hot. I mean, people really weren't inclined to even want to go out. So I think, you know, it's going to be a low turnout. We're still excited, and I think this will be like a stepping stone to get people excited, and then we will start the whole process again.
Now we are going to continue to watch this closely, and we're going to send it back to you guys because we are starting to see some results come in. Ben, Sarah.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Gabby. Yeah, we are starting to see some results come in. Some of those early results. Let's send things over now to Keith McGilvery. Hi, Keith.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening to folks at home. Let's get right to it. We have new numbers. Ben, Wes, Sarah, jump in at any point if you have questions or want me to zoom in on any location. Let's talk about this race for Senate in Connecticut. I've put on my heat map here. If we take this full, what you're looking at here is where these candidates are performing. If they're shaded in their color, that means that they're in the lead at this point. Do want to point out it is 45% of precincts reporting at this point, not 45% of voters, but 45% of our precincts. Again, if we take this full, you can see Leora Levy with 54% of the current vote that has come in. Themis Klarides with some 35%, Peter Lumaj with 10% of the vote. Down here in New Haven is where Claridis has the lead of what has been reported in that region at this point. All of these varying shades of yellow you were looking at, guys, are where Leora Levy is leading within the precincts that have reported. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So but be mindful in all of this as we see these colors change. We only at this point have a total of 984 votes. So nobody should be popping champagne anywhere. It's 984 votes, and that's where things stand at this point. These live numbers coming in courtesy as we peel back the curtain here at Fox 61. We are relying on the Associated Press that provides us our numbers. Those are the numbers that are funneled into our system and the ones that we're sharing with you now, but these numbers are changing moment by moment. Any questions about this or want to move on to the next race?
Move it along.
Let's move on, yeah.
All right, so if we move on to the race for Secretary of State, here we go. Denise Merrill is stepping down after more than a decade. Stephanie Thomas, the endorsed candidate here, with some 73%. That just jumped 3% in a matter of seconds with some 1,541 votes. Maritza Bond, the health commissioner out of New Haven, with 576 votes. What I have been keeping an eye on tonight is how well Maritza Bond would perform in New Haven County, the city of New Haven. A question I might have for Wes is when turnout is incredibly low, could a strong presence from her core constituency, even if it's in one city, make a big difference? So maybe when I join you at the desk, we can talk about that for a moment. As we turn to the Republican race here, a bit of a mixed bag here. Closer, you can see Dominic Rapini with some 56% of the vote, taking on Terry Wood with 44%. Again, with 53% of precincts reported a total of 1,205 votes. Rapini, of course, working in Apple Electronics Division. If his name sounds familiar to folks at home, that is because he ran for Senate back in 2018. Wood, a state rep from Darien, focused on tax policy and mental health. But look at this. If I can go like this, I don't think Darien has reported yet, but I will keep an eye on it. As those colors turn out, it will be interesting to see how she does in her hometown community as well. Where should we go next? Perhaps let's see if we're seeing anything from the 4th Congressional District. So we are not seeing anything here in the 4th Congressional District as of yet. This Jamie Stevenson and Michael Goldstein looking to unseat Democrat incumbent Jim Himes. Of course, he's representing much of Fairfield County, as you see on this board. So we're able to zoom in locality by locality as those numbers start coming in. Stevenson has served as Darien's first selectman with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Goldstein campaigning in favor of secure borders against inflation and career politicians. But really the headline early in the evening right now, and again, I caution folks, is that we are getting a first look. There we go, hold on. Okay, here we go. So we're getting a first look at these Senate numbers as they're coming in. Leora Levy, some 54% of the tallied vote at this point. Themis Claridis, 35%. Peter Lumaj with 11%, a total of about 4,145 votes. You can see how this is fleshing out a little bit across the maps here. Questions, comments, complaints, concerns? You want to zero in on anything? Do you want to touch upon anything specifically here?
Do you want to go back, Wes, to what Keith was asking you earlier?
Yeah, about low voter turnout.
Yeah, let's go to New Haven. You guys get the conversation started, and I will go in. So if we go to the Secretary of the State for Democrats, my question is, if we take this here, can Maritza Bond, the health commissioner from New Haven, could she take over Stephanie Thomas, the endorsed candidate, if New Haven turns out to support their neighbor, their sister, their friend?
Yeah, there is a scenario in which this is mathematically possible. It would really take both low turnout elsewhere and very high turnout in New Haven for that to be possible.
And then what about Fairfield County, Wes? I'm just curious, for someone who's lived in Connecticut his whole life, Fairfield County is always this subset of Connecticut that's really an extension of New York. You have a lot of the wealth in Connecticut populated in that one county. If you look at the 2016 presidential election, you saw a bit of a red wave hitting Fairfield County. Yeah. Just talking about the makeup demographically and politically when it comes to that one specified area.
So it is an enormously well-educated, wealthy, part of Connecticut, as you noted, with strong ties to both finance and New York City. What I think is interesting is that up until relatively recently, certainly in the aughts, this was pretty safe Republican territory. And although there was a little bit of a sign in 2020 of a resurgent GOP, it is quite safe Democratic territory. The long-term trend has been away from the GOP. Whether or not the gains in 2020 will be replicated, I don't quite think we know. But it is in some ways a more conservative part of Connecticut, though it is in its own way socially liberal. It tends to be more fiscally conservative.
Guys, I don't know if I can jump in. Throughout the course of our conversation, we didn't touch upon the treasurer's race, and we do have some numbers on that front. So if we look at this, I will switch on over to the Democrats running for treasurer here. Of course, Sean Wooden not seeking re-election here. And at this point, again, with 17% of precincts reporting a total of 886 votes, Eric Russell, the endorsed candidate from the Democratic Party, with some 61% of that vote. Dita Bargava, who has experience on Wall Street, 28% of the vote, with 249 of those votes that coming in. And Karen Dubois Walton, she was the one who works or has experience in New Haven in that administration field there for that city. And you can see, granted, just 96% of the vote, but right now that locality where she spent a good portion of her career at this point, very early, is shaded in green. Eric Russell in varying degrees of support in these red and pinkish areas. Dita Bargava not turning anything yellow just yet, but it's early.
Once again, too, let's talk about New Haven County, too, just because we've been seeing that they've been trending on their own kind of in some of these races. Can you give us some insight on that, too, Wes?
Certainly in the race that's up on the screen, there is, a hometown, so to say, advantage.
Okay.
I don't think that we quite know enough about which precincts are actually reporting in New Haven and in the rest of the county, and so it's a little bit difficult to make any inferences quite yet.
Well, moving along here, we do want to remind you at home, for a full list of results as they come in, text the word VOTE to 860-527-6161. Very simple. Just text that word VOTE to that number, and once you do that, we'll send results straight to your phone. Again, just a small percentage of precincts reporting right now. The night is still young. Polls just closed about 22 minutes ago. So hopefully you were able to go out and cast your vote. And again, we'll be bringing those numbers to you on air, online, and through our news app with our full voter guide, as well as those numbers keep coming in.
The extreme heat in Connecticut is impacting primary night as well. Officials in Middletown say one of their vote tabulators stopped working because of the high heat. Fox 61's DeAndrea Turner is live in Middletown with more. So DeAndrea, where did this happen? What happened exactly?
Well, right here at this school, I am at Spencer Elementary School. And you guys, you know it's been hot for the last few days. And just imagine being in a hot gym with no AC. That is the perfect combination for a potential disaster. And that's what the officials here tell me what happened. They said that one of their voting tabulation things, it stopped working. And they also tell me the reason why they think that it stopped working was because it was so hot in that building. And they did say that poll workers have been taking ballots from voters and putting them off to the side to be counted separately. Now the polls are closed. They will bring a backup tabulator to run those ballots through. So your votes are still being counted. And I also went to different voting polls across the state today. I went to 5 in Hartford, and they tell me that all is well. You'll actually get to hear from a first-time voter coming up at 10 and 11. For now in Middletown, DeAndrea Turner, Fox 61 News.
All right, thank you, DeAndrea. In just the last few election cycles, there have been so many changes to voting rights and rules, and yet many want to see more.
Well, from who should be able to vote to how these ballot battles are seeking to change voting in Connecticut, some already have.
Today, at least 4,000 more voters could make their way to the polls thanks to a measure signed into law just last summer. It restored rights to people with felony convictions and people on parole. Before, Connecticut only allowed them to vote after they were on probation. Some Republican lawmakers argued people convicted of felonies should have to fulfill their whole punishment, parole and fines included, before voting again. But many argued it was unfair that people on parole who live and work in Connecticut were able to vote for people who make decisions that affect them. An estimated 5.2 million Americans, that's 1 in 44 adults, can't vote because of their criminal record. Felony disenfranchisement dates back to Jim Crow era laws, and the issue does affect Black Americans disproportionately. According to the Sentencing Project, which is a DC nonprofit, 1 in 16 Black adults cannot vote because of these laws.
We're joined right now by Representative Christine Conley, who's been in the Connecticut House of Representatives representing District 40 since 2017. She's worked on some very important bills, including the most recent effort to allow early voting in Connecticut. Thanks for making the trip up from the shoreline.
Thank you for having me.
So talk to us about early voting. Just give us a very basic primer on why it's important in your mind and what it is.
So I'm so excited that we all are going to get to vote in November on early voting. And the ballot question will be, do you wish to vote on a variety of days before Election Day? And if the residents of the state of Connecticut choose to vote to allow early voting, we in the General Assembly in January can then create a law and create the details of early voting.
So I know a lot of people are worried about election integrity and security. So how will early voting play into that? Is there any history of that really chipping away at integrity of our elections?
So 37 states allow early voting right now. Kentucky allows to vote 5 days prior to Election Day, and Minnesota allows to vote all the way up to 46 days prior to Election Day. Along with the other states that allow for no absentee voting for any reason, 45 states allow some form of early voting, and we're lacking in the minority, not allowing folks to vote early. So I think it's really important that we give folks an opportunity to vote at a time that's a little more convenient for them, for folks who might be working 2 jobs or might have very busy days on happens to be the Tuesday, the one election day, to make sure that every resident's voice is heard on who they choose to elect.
What are some of the impacts that you hope that this will have on voter access? You know, we're always talking about barriers to entry. We're always talking about making elections and voter access more widespread every single year. What impact will this have?
Well, we're going to see today that the amount of people who chose to vote today probably is going to be pretty low. And if we look at what happened 2 years ago, when folks were able to do more absentee ballots, 80% of voters had their voice heard as to who they'd like to elect them. So anything we can do to allow those who are eligible to vote at a time that's more convenient and give more people an opportunity to have their voices heard is better for our government as a whole.
All right, thank you for joining us and giving us some insight too on that, and that'll be on our ballot, right?
Absolutely.
November, yes.
We'll look for that.
All right, so are we going to send things back over to? I thought we were sending things back over.
We are going to Keith.
Are you ready for us, Keith?
Oh, why not? The control room is right over my shoulder. Behind the scenes, producers in there. We're talking through this, and the excitement in the control room in the studio is the fact that some of these results are starting to come in. So anyone who has a seat at the desk, you don't need to raise your hand. This isn't elementary school. You can just jump right in if you have a question. And because I walked out of the control room, let's just give it a go and see where things stand. Maybe in this Republican race for that nomination for the United States Senate. Of course, 3 candidates looking to unseat Richard Blumenthal. Right now, again, I caution folks, as I have been all along. Let's go take that off county mode. So ignore that number for a moment if you would. Total votes, 6,126. So of those roughly 6,000 votes, Leora Levy at this point with 52% of that vote total that's coming in. Of course, she recently picked up that endorsement from President Trump on a teletown hall just a couple of days ago. How will that translate into what she does tonight and how her supporters turn out, we will see. Themis Klarides, the longtime presence at the State House here in Hartford, decades of service as a Republican, former minority leader. She has 37% of the vote total that's coming in. And you can see here just down to the detail, she is 1,000 votes or so behind Leora Levy. And then, of course, we saw Tony Black with a live interview minutes ago with Peter Lumaj, who has run for office before. He currently is standing at 11% of the votes that have come in thus far, with 705 of those votes. And again, I direct you to the very specific color coding to this map. When they're shaded in the color of that candidate, that is kind of showing where they are dominating at this point with what has come in.
Keith, can you go down to that 4th congressional race by any chance in Fairfield? I mean, we weren't seeing any numbers reporting, but things might have changed in the last 15 minutes or so, no?
All right, so let's see. So yes, so not dramatically, Ben. We have 341 votes coming in this 4th congressional race. Of course, this is all in an effort to unseat 7-term incumbent Jim Hines, who has laid roost in Fairfield County for quite some time, but you can see at this point Michael Goldstein with some 50% of the votes that are coming in, Jamie Stevenson with some 50% as well. So it's a fairly even split here. When we talk about these two candidates, doing my research on them, they seem to be, you know, you're voting for one or the other. I didn't find too many similarities when it came to breaking these folks down. Stevenson serving as Darien's first selectman and also with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Goldstein campaigning in favor of secure borders against inflation, not in favor of critical race theory from his website as well, but an even draw at this point, again, with just 341 votes coming in, a split of a difference of one single vote there.
Yeah. Things are changing rapidly, too, but it's also, you know, these are early results, too. We have to caution that, too. Can we go back to the Secretary of the State race?
Yep, so the Secretary of the State race, this one is interesting for a number of reasons because our Secretary of State, Denise Merrill, after more than a decade, said she was not going to run for re-election. Right now, some 5,000 votes coming in. Again, green, focusing your attention here. Stephanie Thomas, the endorsed candidate of the Democratic Party here, kind of sweeping the state at this point. It is certainly early here, but green again showing where she has a lead, and the darker the shade of that color, the more significant that lead would be. Stephanie Thomas currently serving in our state legislature, representing Norwalk, Wilton, Westport, at the state capitol in Hartford. Maritza Bond, we've talked about her as well. At this point, she has some 3,121 votes behind Stephanie Thomas. Again, if we break this down to specific localities, I may be thinking this through too much, but because we're able to do it, I can go right in to New Haven, and at this point, Maritza Bond, the health commissioner for this community, is behind by 105 votes to the endorsed candidate, Stephanie Thomas.
Which just underscores the importance of you going out and voting, because she's only 105 votes behind. Well, Keith, maybe just keep flipping through these maps for just a second in our last few moments here. Wes, anything you're seeing that might be surprising or any trends that you were looking at going into tonight?
You know, I don't think that we have enough to know if anything is surprising. I do think that if we, however, go back to the race that was just up a minute ago for Secretary of State.
The Democrats?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, so if you black out of the county and go to the overall. Yeah, so one of the things that is important to remember is that when one candidate is leading overwhelmingly, even if we don't have a lot of votes back, that can be indicative. I'm not saying that we know much about this one, but that is something to look for.
I did not talk about the Republicans in that race, so maybe if I could just switch over quickly. Dominic Rapini, some 59% of the votes that have come in at this point. Terry Wood, 41% of the votes, some 4,000 people choosing to vote in that Republican primary for the Secretary of the State.
All right, Keith, thank you. Well, our crews are out at the polls right now with the candidates all across the state, finding the election stories that matter to you. We'll be checking in with them across Connecticut throughout the evening, and we'll keep you updated from all across the state. They've been out there all day long. We thank each and every one of them. And for full results as they come in, text VOTE to 860-527-6161, and we'll send you the results straight to your phone.
And we'll see you for our regular scheduled broadcast program coming up at 10 and 11. Have a good night.